All right. Well, just as a quick little primer before we dive into our actual content, I wanted, for the sake of, well, just to celebrate the Chiefs' victory, I wanted to share one of my favorite Tableau Public visualizations ever. This is just a little something to get us started here. This is the history of the NFL. Matt Chambers made this. He's a fantastic profile to check out on Tableau Public if you're looking for some inspiration. But I always love showing this visualization because I think it's such a perfect example of where diverging bar charts work so well. Diverging meaning you've got something above or below the line. So what he's done here is if it's a winning season, you're going to be above the bar. This looks like, yeah, perfect season from the Patriots, although they did not win the Super Bowl because the bar is not yellow. This is how you know. Yellow is the first color the eye sees. I love that Matt has used yellow to denote Super Bowl wins. But if you have a perfect season, you're going to have 16. Oh, sure, it's gonna upload. You're going to have 16 wins, or now 17, I guess, because we just got to keep everybody on their toes. But if you also have a really awful season, you're going to have a bar that's below. And that means that in an instant, someone can glance at your diverging bar chart here and know whether it was a winning or a losing season. And then if it's, 8-8, or I guess it will never have something, I guess, right on the line again with 17 games. But it's a lot of fun to see. I always think that this is just an exceptionally well done visualization. And you can see the last couple of years here in Kansas City have been pretty darn good. I think it's interesting to see from here, you can even tell that we actually had a better win-loss record last year, even though we didn't win the Super Bowl, but maybe this year we'll go into it. So I love this visualization. I think this is such a fun example of what you can do with some pretty simple data, like a win-loss record for a team over time. But it's just really, really fun and well done. So I thought I'd point you guys here. I'll put this in the chat just in case anyone wants to download it and have some fun deconstructing it. The other thing that I will just point out is one thing I love about Tableau Public is if I find a visualization that really resonates, I'm like, wow, this is really well done. I love going to the actual profile of the individual and seeing what else is there, because usually it's just really fun to see other things that the individual has made. So here is, I'm assuming 205, I think everyone's about here. At this point, here is one thing that as we kick off 2022, I thought we could ask folks to put in the chat. So I'm going to pull up the chat here so I can see it. Here's my question to everybody here in KC on the call. Oh, not seeing the link. Thank you. How about we share this with everyone? There we go. All right, so here's what to put in the chat at some point today, and we will be jotting these down throughout our first meetup of 2022. Who is someone that you would love to see present at KC Tug? So this could be someone who is in the Tableau community who feels kind of like, oh, if I had a dream presenter, this is who I would love to see. They may be someone's blog you reference all the time, or someone's profile you follow, or someone in the community that you just really admire their work. So I would love to know, pop in the chat, who would you be absolutely thrilled to hear is speaking at KC Tug in 2022? The reason I ask is that, hopefully our meetings will be back in person eventually. And I would love to take full advantage while we can of any virtual presentations for folks who might be elsewhere, but able to pop into a presentation that might still be virtual for the next couple of months. So if you've got a dream presenter, drop it in the chat. That way we, as the steering committee, have a little bit of extra elbow grease to say like, hey, by the way, you were asked for by name to come present to our local tug. So if you got someone that you'd love to see, drop it in the chat and we will be jotting it down today. All right, Sean, any other intro stuff you'd like to mention?
No, I think that was really great. I also agree. I think that's a great idea to ask for who you want to have come talk to us. So I think that's a great idea. So drop your ideas down. I see we got a few coming in, so that's great. And just on the Tableau Public thing, also don't be afraid to take inspiration. Don't steal. but take inspiration from. And Tableau Public also has a way that you can add attribution, inspiration attribution for your visualizations. So be sure and take advantage of that. So
Love it.
that, yeah, have at it.
All right. Well, then we are going to get started. I'm going to go first, and then I'll pass it on over to Sean. We got two things we're going to do today. We've got a dashboard design checklist that I will do, and then Sean's going to walk us through a Workout Wednesday fancy cross tab table. So this will be a lot of fun. We've got a lot of resources. Obviously, this is being recorded just like it always is. So we'll be sure to send that email out. If you see something referenced and you want to go back and look at it, or you want to share the recording with a friend, that'll be coming out later this week once Tableau has uploaded it to their YouTube channel. So with that, I'm going to pop on over to my slides and wait for those to load. Sean, can you give me a quick sanity check that you're seeing what you think you should? Perfect. Yep. Okay. Well, let's dive in. This is going to be the dashboard design checklist. This is 16 steps that I love to reference back to. It's a resource that I made a long time ago, and I always come back to it when I'm creating a dashboard pretty much for anything, for myself, for a client, for a student, whoever I'm working with. This is something that I tend to come back to again and again. And I've refined this over the years. And my hope is that as you're kicking off 2022, this might be a helpful resource to really take, hopefully, your dashboards to another level. So if you're just starting, hopefully there's some things you'll learn in here, especially in the Tableau demo. And if you've been at this a little bit longer, I've got some ideas for you to play around with that will hopefully get those dashboards really, really singing and dancing. So let's dive in. When we talk about aesthetics, here's the definition we all have: a particular theory or conception of beauty or art, a particular taste for or approach to what is pleasing to the senses, especially sight. So when we think about our visualizations, usually I'm thinking about all of the adjustments that come after our work is accurate and it's functional. That is after a lot of work has already happened. So you've already gotten your data structured correctly. It's working in Tableau. You've moved it all the way along to actually building the ideal chart type for whatever data you're looking at. And then it's at this point that you're actually looping back around to the aesthetics. But here's the thing here. I feel like we can often sense or feel when something has that aesthetic polish that's really been taken to the next level, but often we're unsure what are the actual next steps that we need to do in order to transform something from it's okay, it's kind of a Tableau default, or I don't know, it doesn't really sing and dance, to having that immediate reaction that you're like, ooh, this is pretty. I'm now ready to engage, lean in, and it's also very functional. So I love to contextualize this with something that Andy Cockgrave explained many Tableau conferences ago. He said, we experience visualizations in 3 phases. We've got our instant visceral reaction. Something comes on the slide, something shows up you land on a website, you look at a dashboard, you have the visceral reaction. What is your knee-jerk response? Usually I think of this as you either want to lean in, ooh, that's interesting, that piques my interest, or you kind of pull back a little. Do I have to spend time here? We want to pull people in. He says the next thing, this is really where the big time investment comes in, is the behavioral question. How do the dashboards actually work? How do I make sure that I understand what the chart says, how the filters work, all of that components? And then you've got this reflective piece that comes in the future. Now that you've seen the viz, now that you've interacted with the dashboard, how do you act or think differently than if you had never interacted with it? Maybe you physically come back to it, or maybe you return to the concepts you learned in your mind. Now, here's the trick. We usually build in reverse. We start with what is it that our audience wants, we want them to learn? What is the takeaway or the call to action that we want our dashboard to have? And then we go back to, okay, so how will that behave? What are the components that I actually need to build? What interactivity do I need to set up? And usually by the time we've made it all the way to where the behavior is fully working, we've done a lot of work, and it can feel like a lot of extra time to really clean up that visceral, instant aesthetic moment. And this is the moment we often forget, but it's the thing that we can control with aesthetic design that can pull someone really into our visualization and slow them down enough that they actually will lean in and see how the thing works. So we build in reverse, but we've got to be able to hook someone to catch them with the aesthetic design up front. So grab a piece of paper a sticky note. If you don't have a piece of paper, I bet your phone's nearby. Grab your phone with a little notepad open. Here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna do a little activity to illustrate this. So I went on Tableau Public. I work with the education sector all the time. So I went and looked on Tableau Public under Discover for anything that was in the education little section. And they had 20 dashboards there. So I went ahead and grabbed screenshots of all of them. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna show you very quickly 4 thumbnails from Tableau Public's education sector. And I want you to rank them on which you would most want to click and which you would least want to click. So thinking through here, you might be like, ooh, that one, then I'd probably go there. I guess if I had time, I'd go there. I guess if I have to, I would go there. So you got your pen ready, you got your sticky note. Your sticky note will look something like this, or your scratch paper will look something like this. Jot these down and keep it so you can reference the slides later and see which ones you were actually wanting to lean into. So here we go. This should be quick. Jot it down, 1 through 4. What do you want to click on the most? What do you want to click on the least? All right, here comes the second one. Here comes the third one. Here comes the fourth one. And last but not least. Okay, so let's talk about emotion. Set your scratch paper, your sticky note aside, but I hope next time around Tableau Public, you'll take note. Hey, which ones am I really drawn to and which ones kind of push me away? When we think about this, we're really thinking about how does a visualization feel? How does it attract us to wanting to look at that dashboard, or we just kind of want to turn away? We've got sort of 2 sides of this. We've got the negative and the positive. So when I think of emotions that I would tack onto visualizations or adjectives that I would assign visualizations, here are some of the negative ones that come to mind. The dashboard is overwhelming, it's chaotic, it's confusing or loud, distracting, it's disorienting, it might feel lopsided, might be really dense, heavy, crowded, washed out, kind of too cutesy, or feels kind of tone deaf or downright offensive. It might feel just pointless. I don't know why I'm looking at this, superficial or fluffy, doesn't really have the depth I'm after. It might feel really time consuming to actually figure out. It might be repetitive, I've already seen this, or just generic or just stale. So those are kind of some of the negative emotions that when I look at, especially in my own work, all of these things have come up. These adjectives that come up with dashboards that don't really have that polish or zing that I'm looking for. Then on the positive side, there are the ones that feel intuitive. They're digestible, approachable, they are a striking design, they feel intentionally put together, or there's something familiar that I can really grasp onto. They feel balanced. They are dashboards that are curated, they feel clean or light, crisp, professionally put together. They're very thoughtful, feel inclusive, and they're just interesting. They might be addictive. I might really have trouble walking away from some of the best dashboards. They feel substantial, they have meaning, they're memorable, rewarding, and they're unique. There's something that if I close my eyes, I can see the dashboard. So when I think about the negative side of things, this is where we kind of pull back. We don't want to really look at the dashboard. And when I think of how these come together, there's kind of 3 labels that come into the big problems I see with dashboard design. Things either feel too busy, they feel dated in some way, or they're just boring. They're just not that interesting. And then on the positive, if we get the inverse of all of these, the things that really pull us in, they feel streamlined, modern, and engaging. So here's what we're going to do with that primer. Here's our goal for today. We're going to walk through first a dashboard design checklist. This is going to be the 16 levers that I think you can pull and adjust in order to really hone in on a fantastic design for your dashboards. Then we'll talk through those 3 problems, trying to go from busy to get to streamlined, dated to get to modern, or boring to get to engaging. And we'll talk through some tips and tricks that now that you know which pieces you can pull or levers you can work with, dials you can tune, then how do you identify which of these buckets you might be sitting in for any dashboards that don't really sing and dance yet, and how you can then adjust them to really be something that you're really proud of and you know folks are going to want to engage with. Okay, so here we go. Here's the dashboard design checklist. I've got all of these slides waiting for you on my website, so if you're welcome to take notes, but there is no pressure to you. here's our 4 categories. We've got ink. This is going to be our color, the weight of the color, the lines, and the shading. We've got our words. These are going to be our fonts, our alignment, our axes or labels, or our tooltips or pop-ups. These kind of things are going to be adjustments we tend to make for both these categories on the visualization side of things. And then as we're laying out our dashboard, we're going to be thinking about zones, flow, balance, and negative space. And we're going to be looking for footholds. I like footholds as think of like a mountain climber who's trying to digest what you've put together. How can we help them our audience understand what we're looking at? We're thinking about our title, the keys, the instructions, and the annotations. And just a couple things to note here. These are concepts that we see all the time just in good design. They're not necessarily specific to dashboards or data dashboards or visualizations. For example, if you look here, you can see the colors we've got working with. We've got a coral, we've got black and white. And then if you think about weight, you can even look at these little bullet points. The weight here is lighter because they're not completely filled in. You've got the little lines going in the middle. If you think about layout, you've got zones 1, 2, 3, 4. And if you think about how the eye flows, if we start at the top left, we're going this way, we've got this intentionally here to pull your eye back into the slide so that we can actually keep your eye in the frame. This is something we talk about in photography critiques actually all the time. How do we keep the eye in the frame? So looking for places it might leave. If you think about negative space, you have the space between the columns, the space down here, titles, all of these components are at work, even on a PowerPoint or a Google slide, not just in data dashboards. So let's do a quick Tableau demo. We're going to take these 16 items and we're going to take this very simple bar chart and we are going to turn it into, with our 16 items, this bar chart afterwards. So let me pop out of presentation mode here. I'm going to come back over. Let's look at the finished version we're trying to get to, and then we'll go fix it. So quick sanity check. Sean, can you see Tableau now?
Yes.
Fantastic. Thank you, sir. All right. So this is a very simple bar chart. This was built in conjunction with the Cohen Institute, which is out of New Orleans, and it was very simple data. They're wanting to look at, if you take all of the jobs in New Orleans, how do they compare, if you distribute them across these 20 segments, how do they compare to those jobs in Louisiana more broadly, and then the United States as a whole? So for example, over here, the top one is going to be accommodation and services. This is 16% of the jobs in New Orleans. And you can see with Louisiana here and the United States here, that it's got almost double the amount of accommodation and food service jobs as Louisiana as a state or the United States more broadly, which makes sense, right? New Orleans is a very tourist heavy destination, makes sense. So one way to look at this is, as we're saying here, if the bar comes way further out than the dots, then we know that those jobs are overrepresented in New Orleans. If the dots come further out than the bar, we know that those jobs in New Orleans here are underrepresented compared to Louisiana and the United States. And if everything is kind of clustered right around the same, we know that proportionally, we've got the same number of jobs in those sectors in New Orleans as we're seeing in Louisiana or the United States. Now, you'll notice that this visualization is functionally identical to this visualization. However, if there was some part of you that was like, ew, is that what it looks like? I like the other one better. That is what we're talking about. That's that visceral reaction of, if I show you this versus this one, you're more likely to walk away and go, that looks like a lot of work. It's not very pretty. I don't really want to lean in. We're trying to get it here with our 16 steps. So I'm going to go pretty quickly through these in Tableau, but that way we kind of have it in a little demo that you can refer back to. And I'm going to move all the Zoom links somewhere where this is more helpful. Okay, so let's dive in. First things first, let's get our ink working correctly. So we are going to change our colors here. Let's go ahead and go to click colors, edit colors. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the color palette from the Cowen Institute, and I'm going to leverage this green they have in their palette for New Orleans. That's the color in their logo. That'll be the main bar. Then Louisiana, get this kind of burnt orange, and the United States, I'll use their navy color. I'm going to go ahead and apply these. I'm a big fan of the apply button so that you can kind of scoot over, see how it works, and then make adjustments if you want to. I'm going to say, okay, this looks great. All right, next I'm going to talk about weight. So if I've got dots that are really overlapping here, I actually want to take the color and pull the opacity down to like 80% so that I can see those changes. If they're overlapping, I can see what's happening there. And to emphasize that, I'm going to put a border around just my circles. So I'm going to come down here to my measures and just on color, I'm going to put a circle. Let's do a white circle around those. I'm also, while I'm here, going to make those circles just a little bit bigger. Now, the point, I know I'm moving quickly, is to show you guys what's possible and maybe where the buttons are located, but this is something that you can always come back with and play with. I just more want to demonstrate where the tweaks and leverages that the sort of levers you can make, the dials you can tune, where those things exist in Tableau. Okay, so we've got our color, we've got our weight. The next thing, let's talk about lines. One thing I always say about lines is, if you think about visualizing something on graph paper and you think back to like 4th grade and having to, measure out your bar chart that you're creating, you would start with a ruler and a pencil, and then you would create your own scaffolding in order to make something actually accurate. And then when you're done and you've got your visualization all put together, you would probably erase a lot of the scaffolding that you needed in order to build the chart. The problem is, in the tech world, when we have software that's generating that scaffolding automatically, it will get overlaid, and a lot of it we just don't need. So my recommendation is always go ahead, format this stuff, go to your borders and your lines. Your borders are going to be the things around the visualization. Your lines are going to be things that are actually in here with the marks, and just erase everything. So I'm going on the sheet here. I'm going to get rid of the row divider. I'm going to get rid of the column divider. I'm going to come over to lines. I'm going to get rid of the grid lines on the columns and the 0 line. I'm literally just erasing everything. And now that I've erased everything, that's when I'm going to decide, what was I leveraging? What was my eye using that was there that was actually helpful? So erase it all and then just intentionally put back the lines or the borders or the shading that you need. In this case, what happens is, if we get these lines that are, or dots that are pretty far out from the bar or the label, my eye was actually using that to understand that this dot are related to, for example, here, manufacturing. So what I'm going to add back in, I'm going to go to format, I'm going to go to my little shading bucket, and I'm going to make sure I'm on rows here, and I'm going to turn on the row banding here so that I can see very quickly, okay, here are the dots that are floating. My eye gets pulled right back to manufacturing, so I can see where these floating dots really are anchored in terms of our axes and their relationship to the New Orleans bars. Okay, that is ink. So our ink is now taken care of. Let's move on to words. So another way to make good friends with anyone who's in public affairs or the people that make the style guides is to ask anyone who's responsible for branding in your organization, hey, do you have a style guide? That's where I got the colors from the Cowan Institute, and it's where I'm going to get their fonts. So I'm going to right click here and I'm going to say format, and I'm going to go ahead and take this to Helvetica. Yep. And I'm also going to change this to this dark navy blue that's part of their world and make it a little bit smaller here. I'm also going to hold on to that font in my mind, so anything else that I want to change, I can use. The next thing I want to do is really want to get this alignment working. So when I glance at this, one of the things that would be nice is to actually have the rank of the sector over here that would be easy to access. So I'm going to go ahead and do this. I'm going to take New Orleans here, and I'm going to turn this into a discrete. This is giving me the percentage, the same as the bar. I'm going to take this and instead change that quick table calculation to be a rank. I'm going to set that in front of my industry. I'm going to scooch this over so it's right next to it. I'm going to first go to my shading. I'm going to change the level so we get that shading bar all the way to the side. And then I'm going to click on this individual ranking here, right click and say format. And I'm going to go ahead and take that, make it the blue and make it bold. So it kind of gives our eye something to follow down. And I'm going to make this Helvetica too. Okay, so now I've got my alignment really happening well there. The other thing I would do if I'm really cleaning this up is to go in and edit the alias of anything that's really overlapping here. So you could go in and change really long things like this. If it's not working, but it's still, you can still communicate everything that you're looking for here and need to shorten it up so it's easier to scan, you could do that as well. And then make sure we give everything the full length to actually see the labels. So now we've got our fonts working, our alignment working. Let's talk about our axes. So the first thing, I'm going to get rid of any duplicative axes. Right now, this is a combo chart. I don't actually need this header. And the other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to edit this axis down here and change this to a label that means something instead of just what Tableau's default is. So this is, I'm going to just call this % of all jobs. And I'll X that up. The last thing I want to edit are my tooltips. Now, for those of you who have heard me present before, you know that I can get on a soapbox about everything that is wonderful about editing your tooltips. So here I will save you that and just say, I really, really recommend that you take the time to edit your tooltips. They add so much. I'm going to come over here to our finished version and cheat and grab the finished text here so you don't have to watch me do a bunch of typing, but I'm going to go to my tooltips and I'm going to add this in. What I've done when you are in it, not sure what to do with your tooltips, one thing that I recommend is see if there's a way to connect what folks are associating color-wise into your tooltips. So the bar is 6%, 7% here. Go ahead and put that in. That's New Orleans. And then when you're completely at a loss, just make a sentence. If you were sitting down next to someone, how would you describe the marks that they're hovering over? And then just write it out and you can put that in your tooltips. Okay, so that gets us halfway through. We've got our ink, we've got our words taken out. Now let's go ahead and make a dashboard. I'm gonna move this on up, I'm gonna make a dashboard here. I'm gonna go ahead and just make this an automatic size. So it will expand and collapse with the screen as we work it. And I'm just going to start to lay this stuff out. So I like to use containers. I'll give you a couple container tips here. When I make a new container, I always bring 2 blank objects and stack them to start. And then I check that they are stacked correctly. You can always double click right where this 4-pronged arrow is. You can double click and you can see which container you're in. Double click again and you'll get taken a further layer up. This will basically walk you through the item hierarchy that's happening here. You've got your tiled container, your vertical container that has 2 blank objects. But that little trick of double clicking the 4-pronged arrow was something I learned about just in the last couple of years. And I thought, gosh, how did I ever build anything without this? So the reason I like to go ahead and add the blank containers is then it gives me a really nice place to drop stuff in. So I can go ahead and bring things in and know that the container has the correct horizontal or vertical layout. When I see anything extra brought in that I don't need, I'm just going to remove it, say delete that container. And here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and start thinking about the zones. So when I'm thinking about a layout, I'm thinking, how do I set up so that when you first glance at a dashboard, you could immediately tell me how many zones there are. Here in our finished dashboard, we're just going to have 2. There's a top and a bottom. But what we want to do is make it very easy for folks to see and get their mind around how much stuff do I have to work on. That is the component that from a distance on a thumbnail, it's actually really calming for us to see that. It gives us a confidence boost as an audience member. I see there's 1 chart and 1 top label. So let's go ahead and think about how we're going to lay this out. We've got our visualization down here. We're going to put the Cohen Institute icon in this corner so that our eye kind of follows this arc around and we stay within the frame. This little ribbon that's going across is actually pulling our eye over to the title. So we'll put our title there. We'll give some instructions here. And then at the end, we're going to add our annotation down the side so that we have a little, think of it like a bumper in bowling that keeps your eye staying in the frame. If you come down here to where this negative space is that gives the visualization some breathing room, there's something that's going to pull your eye back into the frame. And also when folks are at a loss and they're not sure what your visualization means, a quick annotation like that can give them some confidence. I see when I don't know what to do, I will read. And once I've started to read the annotation, I know maybe how to keep going. So let's go ahead and lay this out in Tableau. we are going to go ahead and get our sheet here. I'm gonna hide this. And I know that I'm gonna up here, not just need a blank box, but I'm gonna need a horizontal container. So once I do that, I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna take my 2 blank ones and I'm gonna put it, and you can see why you do this, right? See how tricky this is getting? I'm gonna bring this container down, make it a little bigger. I'm gonna put this blank one next to it. So I've got some easier spaces to work with. Okay. Now what I'm gonna do, unfix that height. Well, no, let's go ahead and pull that down. We can adjust it later as we want. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add an image. This is gonna be where the Institute's image goes. So go into choose the image. It'll take me to, there's the Cohen Institute. I'll say open, that's great. This is where also you can add a link. So if you wanted to have your logo and then have someone click on your logo and go to your website, you could do that. So we'll add that. I'm gonna edit that image so that it's the right size. So I'm gonna fit and center, say okay. And then I'm gonna go ahead and put a little bit of text on it. Again, I'm gonna cheat. I'm gonna grab my text from the finished version so you don't have to watch me type. And we'll grab, this is gonna be some text right underneath. So again, I'm thinking about that flow. I'm gonna get this going on the left, top left, and then pull over to my title. So when I do that, I'm gonna need another vertical container. I'm gonna go ahead and take this blank one, put it inside, see how that gets tricky? This is why I think that containers can be so tricky, but if you put 2 items in, now suddenly there's a nice, easy place to plop your icon. And for us, we're gonna add a little text box underneath. We'll center this up just to say what it is, get rid of this extra guy. Now I'm gonna take this little container and I'm gonna try to find some balance here. So I'm gonna move this so that this little area is kind of lines up with the same segment underneath where all of the labels are for those bars. Now I'm in a pretty good space to go ahead, I'm gonna undo that and add a text box where I'm gonna put my title, pop that in. And I'm also gonna grab these instructions right here. We'll put this underneath. We'll say, okay. Pull that over. And we can see how this is starting to come together. Now here, I'm gonna go to the bottom here and make sure that I don't have any extra space there. And we can shorten that so it all fits. And then what we're gonna do from here is if we want this zoning to have some obvious layout where we've got the gray behind it, we can go ahead and click up. So we've got this whole container selected. We can go to our layout tab and we can go over and give it just a light gray background. This will give us a little space. And then the last thing here, we've got our balance working, we've got our title over here. Let's give it a little bit of negative space. So I like to go all the way up to the top item, and you can give it just a little bit of a cards sort of feel or a little breathing room if you just give it a little bit of extra padding around it. So I'm just giving it 16 pixels all the way around the entire dashboard, so it has a little bit of breathing room. So then we are on to our footholds. We've got our title here. When you're at a loss for a title, what should it be? I love asking a question that the dashboard or the chart below answers. So how do the major industries in New Orleans compare with Louisiana and the United States? You'll see that we've overlaid our color legend just in the title. And then underneath it, we've given some instructions as well. So we've baked our key in, and then we've also told people, hey, if you're not sure what to do, here's how to read this chart. Then the last thing that we're gonna do is I'm gonna go grab this annotation, and I'll go ahead, right click on the food and accommodation services. I'll annotate the mark. I'll drop in my text. And this is where I can go ahead and take this wherever I'd like it, but I kind of want to keep it somewhere down here where it's going to block someone's eye from just shooting out of the frame. And I can then right click, you can edit everything. So we're going to format our little text box here. We're going to take that to be green, that same green that's really on brand for the Cowan Institute. We're also going to do a single edge border. I love to make a really thick single edge border, and we can make it this blue, this navy color. And that will kind of bring our eye. So someone, if they're not sure where to start, they will start here first, and then they'll kind of deconstruct and work backwards. If they read through from the top all the way down, then this will pull them back into the frame. So there you go. There's our super quick application of the 16 points. Let's go back and look through in the screen what we actually did here. So we started with color, changed the color of the ink, and then changed the weight. Then we got rid of the lines, get out that eraser, and then added back in the shading to help our eye place where these little dots are in relationship to the New Orleans bars. Then we made the fonts the same as the brand, alignment with our ranking over here, got rid of the extra labels, cleaned up our axis along the bottom, populated our tooltips, and then made our zones. So we've got 2 zones, thinking about how the flow works with this icon, with their logo, get the balance situated where the logo is over the labels, get the negative space working. We've got a lot of negative space down here, and getting the negative space around the outside as well. Then you see how that difference, it just gives that little bit of breathing room to it. We add the title, we put in our color legend, we add the chart instructions, how do you actually work with this thing? And then we add that annotation to give an anchor if someone's landing here for the first time. So that's our after. If you look at all of these from a distance, there's 2 shortcuts basically that our brain makes that I want to highlight for you so that you understand what might be happening from a distance if someone's looking at a thumbnail of your dashboard on Tableau server or something like that, or Tableau public. The first one is that color really sets the tone. This dashboard feels totally different tone-wise than the rest of these. That's why we have different colors for different brands. And the zones build comprehension confidence. So what we said earlier is if you can from a distance go, hey, this thing has 2 zones. It's got a top gray header and it's got a bar chart. That even that amount of confidence is enough to make us feel like as an audience member, we got a quick win. We know we're on the right track. We feel up to the challenge of deconstructing someone else's visualization, and it pulls us in. So let's take a step back then. If you've got those 16 items that are the 16 levers that you can kind of pull and adjust in Tableau, then the question is, well, what are you trying to go from to? And so we can often feel the difference between visualizations that feel really polished and have gone through sort of nice tuning with the checklist, and ones that just still miss the mark in some capacity. So I'm going to show you, here's what I would recommend is if this stuff resonates, if you feel like your stuff is busy, here are some tips to get to streamlined. We'll look at some examples, and then we'll do the same thing for dated and modern. So if you're feeling like things are a little bit busy, I'm gonna pull the Zoom thing down, then here's what I'd recommend. Get out your eraser first. Just like we did with the lines, go through and remove anything that's unproductive, adjust default formatting, get rid of any duplicative information, and especially distracting text. If things start feeling really busy, often it's that we've put labels on everything and we're not really highlighting a story. We're just putting a ton of labels out on our dashboard. Then working with the zones, right? If things feel busy, whittle it down to max 5 zones, 2 to 3 ideally. If you are struggling with this, you're really trying to find some sort of intuitive hierarchy that at a distance, someone could say, this is more important than this. Make sure that you use shading enclosures when things start to have multiple zones or some capacity that can tell someone this is different than the thing next to it. And also vertical layouts can be something that are really helpful. So if you're looking at a dashboard and the thing needs all of this to be kind of in conversation with each other, but it's way too busy to have on one sort of landscape view, play with a vertical layout. Remember to leverage your familiar patterns. So an organization's brand and purposeful font sizes, this stuff is kind of like, oh, if I recognize it, then my brain doesn't have to work to figure it out. So if suddenly, for example, in this slide deck, if I change to a totally different color combination and different fonts, your brain would say, oh, that must be important. I better pay attention to that. And now that cognitive load has gone up for what you're trying to understand. Whereas if you keep all of that the same, using templates or style guides for your dashboard, for your organization, then things feel less busy. Make sure you give people clear instructions, and then be aware of cultural connotations as well. The last thing that I think is when things start feeling really busy, sometimes they feel really colorful. So make sure you use color in a meaningful way. Ideally, save color for the data. So one of the best recommendations that I love that comes from Storytelling with Data and Cole, who runs that organization, is she always says, start in grayscale. I think this works so well. And then just add in the data, the color for the data. Ideally, use a single color emphasis. If you can get away with that, great. And if not, max it out at 3 to 5 colors. Once you've got more colors than that going on, that is not something we're able to walk around with in our head. And it makes a very busy thing. Remember, she always says, Cole from Storytelling with Data, she always says a data visualization should never be colorful for color's sake. That's not what we're creating here. We're using color for a meaningful outcome. So I'm going to do a quick critique, and I want to put a disclaimer up front before I start critiquing anyone else's work. I have personally made every error that I am about to critique, and sometimes still do. So it's very easy to point out, hey, here's what I would do differently. But I always want to make sure that you recognize that I have made every single one of the errors and continue to fall into these pitfalls all the time. So take all my critiques with a grain of salt. So of the visualizations we looked at in the beginning that come from Tableau Public's education sector, here's one that really felt busy to me. Here are a few things I'd point out. One, there's a ton of text and it's difficult to distinguish what text is. So we've got instructions, click here to highlight the same text that is a label or a title over a section. What makes up the rankings? There are so many labels here. I would really just, if I were redesigning this, I would want to just annotate the points of interest as opposed to everything, and then add that information maybe in the tooltip or add a toggle, see all labels, if you would give that as an option to the end user, but maybe not make that something that is overwhelming someone to begin with. The branding here is off. So these are clearly sort of Tableau's default colors. And what's tricky here is the equal rankings between these two papers. They're ranking the different universities here. The Guardian is clearly blue, and yet the Guardian here is orange. And if the two papers align in their ranking, that is blue. So it puts some extra cognitive load on your end user to try to tease that apart. Recommend making sure you're always using the best chart type for the question at hand. I think a slope chart here would actually potentially work better, and making zones. So in my mind, if this is the main sort of meat of the dashboard, then maybe moving this down. And then when we see tables like this, this is actually a ton of rows in here, but you can only see the top line. This is when I recommend either work with a vertical layout and give yourself more space so it's not as overwhelming, or just eliminate it. Put it on a website's appendix or something like that, and let that information live elsewhere as a way to complement the dashboard, but not clutter the dashboard. On the other side, here was an example from that education set that I felt like was really streamlined. So this is looking at jobs that lawyers get after they go through law school. They really have limited this to just the most productive pieces. Anything that pulls back to that top, smaller classes, better jobs, looking at this trend in law schools. And as you scroll through, you've got obvious zones. You know which pieces go where. You've got this vertical layout that's giving you more space. So if all of this information were right here above the fold, it would feel way more cluttered. It's got succinct text that really pulls you in. You know what the theme is. The intentional color, we're using orange here as sort of the highlight color. It's really bringing the eye into understanding what's unique about each individual chart. And the labels have clearly all been edited to be sort of a minimalist label. So that works really well. So that's one thing. If you feel like your dashboards are busy and you're trying to make them more streamlined, those are some tools you might have in your toolkit. If you're thinking you're trying to go from things that feel a little bit more dated to something that feels modern, here are some things to think about. You're going to want to look for modern colors. This tends to avoid a background shading. Use grays over browns, which works well with that sort of grayscale tactic from Cole. Rich contrast that's easy to read, contemporary palettes. These are things you can just Google, like give me a great palette. If you don't have a contemporary palette coming from your organization, or that you don't have a style guide, go find something that you really like and then you can stick to. So it's less work for your audience to figure out. Make sure those fonts are updated. We're usually wanting sans serif fonts. large, bold titles for digital legibility, and then maybe some lighter text when you've got support text so it doesn't really weigh down. Use negative space, give the items in between on your dashboard some breathing room. That's where that inner and outer padding in the layout tab in Tableau can be so helpful. So outer and inner padding, and then just looking for some breathing room. You'll notice this in both light and dark mode. So it's not even a matter of like, it has to be white or it has to be gray or it has to be black. It's that there is space between it. Whether you're in a light mode or a dark mode, you'll notice this in different applications that you're using today. And then scrutinize the content. I would recommend avoiding any sort of cutesy elements unless there's a really important theme that goes with it. And I would review it with tone. Explain any oddities so that you don't sort of trigger people's hackles. They don't go up and start distrusting you, and get a diverse group of reviewers to look over the finished product. I got a book, little tangent. I got a book in the mail that I had ordered. I was so excited about it. I heard this guy interviewed on a podcast. I ordered the book. The book arrives, from Amazon, and I open it up. And I'm really excited to read this business book. I flip it over and I look to see, who's reviewed it on the back. And there are tons of reviews. And within like 4 seconds, I was like, wow, these are all men. So here I am, young woman business owner, and I'm looking at this book, so excited, flip it over, and I'm like, oh, I don't think this was intentional. But the message here is this is not for you. So when I say that is to say that if you get a diverse group of reviewers, if I had been in the room with that book, I could have said in a heartbeat, hey, this is a problem. And I think that as we build our dashboards, having a good, trusted, but diverse group of reviewers can be a way to make sure that our stuff doesn't feel antiquated, old, or just tone deaf or offensive. I mean, sometimes that's the extreme version of it. So here's one that feels dated to me from the Tableau education examples. The cutesy icons. I get that it's about education, but I would also say if it's not for kids, make sure it's for adults and it's very easy and legible. So the cartoony aspects here kind of almost make me question the data itself. Anytime you go with primary colors, red, blue, yellow, you're going to get this sort of fundamental feeling of simplicity that might be sort of immature. And that's a question of whether that's what you actually want to get. Notice that while there's a great breathing room margin around the side here, this really comes right to the edge and could benefit from some extra space here, which it didn't have. We've got the cream background, so even just making this white or a light gray would, I think, modernize it. We've got the serif fonts everywhere, so sans serif fonts could update it as well. And then here's the tone deaf moment. I'm sure that this is unintentional. I have no doubt that this is unintentional. But the message here, when I glance at this, is here's the reason that students should learn these 3 very wealthy country languages is so that they can talk to white men in those countries who are the powerful people. And it just feels sexist in a way that I'm sure is unintentional. But again, that's the thing that makes me just kind of step back. It pulls away from the dashboard. And even if the rest of the data is going to actually be really helpful, it's a turnoff. It makes me want to move on. So here, on the other end of the spectrum was something that felt really modern. This dashboard, again, came from those education examples. The color palette is very modern, high contrast, and this use of small multiples does a great job of saying, here's everything that we've got. Let me break that down so you can see it more clearly. I do think it could benefit from a little bit more negative space, and I would think that a polygon style like this would actually work really well without the gray backgrounds that just get a little bit distracting, but I think this is really well done. All right, last but not least, if you're like, no, it doesn't feel dated and it doesn't feel busy, I just don't feel like my dashboards pull people in, they're not that engaging, here's the last round of recommendations. So there is a hook, build, payoff format that comes from writing, and it's every commercial you see, every book, every movie, there's something that hooks you, then there's a build, and then there's a payoff for actually sticking around. That is the type of arc we want to make with our visualizations. So we want to have a dynamic visual, something viscerally interesting, like, oh, look at that, I want to lean in. You want headlines that are skimmable. Someone is going to decide whether they're actually going to give you the time for those more intense, sort of time-consuming pieces, and which things they're just going to kind of go through. They're going to decide whether it's actually worth going into those visualizations. this can be a great place to add annotations that give your audience a foothold to say, hey, is this worth actually leaning into? Oh, that's interesting. I see how that works. I'm going to keep going. Finding yourself in the data is often the best hook of all. If someone in your audience can see themselves in the data, that is the easiest way to say, I actually want to know more. I want to know more about how I fit into this data and the context around it. Then if you hook people in, you want to make sure you've got substantive content that will actually say, yes, this was worth my time. I'm glad I'm reading this. It's kind of like starting a TV show and being like, oh, they hooked me with the commercial and then I started it, totally boring. You want bite-sized pieces that people feel, again, those quick wins, that they're actually making progress, that meaning is accumulating with those pieces, and you're increasing your audience's confidence that they are understanding what you are communicating. And then the payoff, you want an explicit point. If you can't tell me explicitly what's the purpose of the dashboard, it's usually time to head back to the whiteboard and think through it. You want active interpretations. So if your dashboard could have many interpretations and some of those might be completely wrong, it is our responsibility as the analyst to make sure that we actually put some explicit interpretations on there on our dashboard and kind of walk people through, here's what we're seeing, this leads us to this insight or this interpretation. Call to actions and next steps, and then hopefully a rewarding ROI. You want the return on the investment of the time they've put into your dashboard to really feel like it was worth the time to begin with. This is one that felt a little boring and confusing. This sort of duplicative dashboard was actually, I think, a way to say, hey, you can adjust the college down here and here's all of the programs together. But it really kind of was, okay, so we have an enrollment that goes up over time. So did the US population. What else do we have? And then some confusion about why there's two of them. And then annotating the story here, if you get this down to just one enrollment, area chart with a line, and then you go ahead and set it up with some annotations of, hey, this is when certain colleges were founded, or this is when clearly World War II happened. Those moments can actually help pull someone into a visualization that otherwise is kind of lackluster. Here's an example from our education dashboards that I thought was really well done. Toughest places for a girl to get an education. So right off the bat, this big bold title grabs your attention. It states exactly what the dashboard is about. And the first visualization is very interesting. You know that it's a map of the world. It pulls you in right away and you're hooked. Then as you continue to scroll down through this dashboard, there's actually substantive information. It continues to earn your attention as you go. And at the end, right here, it gives you a very clear call to action. Some of this is a little lofty, and yet it's very clear what the author of this dashboard wants you to take away. I feel like that works so well. So with that, I will go ahead and say there are changes that we make to our own work over time. Here's the dashboard that we built earlier. Here was an original version that I presented actually at TC. And when I opened it back up a couple years later to rework this presentation, I was like, oh, I don't like that at all. So our own work is going to progress. I love documenting our progress publicly. For example, don't delete your earliest work off Tableau Public just because it's not your favorite anymore, because it shows that progress to other people who might be coming up behind you and proud of the work. So a couple of things we changed here. We opted for more modern colors. All of these colors and all of these colors are in the color template or the style guide for the Cowan Institute. It was just a matter of choosing one that really resonated with their logo. And shifted from this sort of dark, heavy, all of the color, all of the weight is up here in the title, to working in that grayscale. And that opened up this visualization so much. Rebalanced the header. So I put the logo over here. You can see this ribbon, instead of pushing you out of the frame, now is pulling you either down into the headers or across to the title, and anchored that flow around here as well. So I like to show that at the end just to say that this is a process. It's not something that we learn overnight. The way that we get better at this is by doing it. The more reps we get in actually trying to use different templates or different checklists or take inspiration from other folks on Tableau Public, that is really where we can get to sitting down in Tableau and being able to create something consistently we're really excited about. If you're just thinking about perfection, but you're not actually working on it, those skills just don't come into place. So with that, I will say thank you so much. And right at the hour, I'm going to go ahead and see if there are any questions. I don't see anything in the Q&A. Sean, did you see any questions come through? Otherwise, I'm going to hand this over to you.
No, I think it was that was really great.
Sounds good.
You always do a wonderful job of kind of helping to provide those building blocks for new users. So really great presentation. Thank you.
Perfect. Well, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Yep, sounds great.
Go for a workout Wednesday.
All right, that's right. Thanks, Thanks, Erin. All right, everybody. Hello. Hope everyone's having a great Chiefs Victory Monday. I will disclaim this presentation might sound a little hoarse because I yelled my face off at the game yesterday. So apologies for that. Hopefully I don't screw anything up too bad. But what we're going to do today, so we did the design. We did the design element just now with Erin. Today, now we're going to go technical. We're going to start learning. We're going to learn about measure names and measure values and some of the cool things you can do to manipulate that. And also some LODs. We're going to talk about some level of detail expressions and how to interpret those and make sense of them. So let's go ahead and show what we're going to be working on today. So what we're going to do is we are going to build a fancy text table, right? So we spend a lot of time talking about different charts and, you know, how to make things, how to aggregate things, but sometimes we just need to meet our users where they are in their environment and in their journey of data visualization. And sometimes a table is just what they want and a table is just what they need, and that's okay. But there's some ways that we can take some of those pre-attentive attributes and put them into a crosstab table and also use some of our technical prowess to make a really great table. So that's what we're going to do. This is, I will go ahead and drop this in the chat. We can get started and you can absolutely follow along. So there is the link. If you would like to follow along, you're more than welcome to. This is going to be we're going to build from scratch. So if you want to follow along, please do that. We're just going to use Superstore. You can use any data source that you want. But so here are the requirements for this. And here is the final dashboard that we're going to build. So let's take a look at this. So what we're going to do, we're going to build a dashboard. It's just one sheet, no text boxes. And we're going to have a table. This table is going to have current year metric, a prior year metric, the percent difference of those metrics, the delta of those, and then dates that go along with those. So the best date within that month and the worst date within that month. And we're going to do that all using only measure names and measure values. So we are going to be having some fun. So let's slide on over to Tableau here. I've already connected to Superstore data. You can do that. The first thing we need to do, since we're doing current year, prior year, I'm going to go ahead and, for the sake of this demonstration, I'm going to go ahead and hard code in a date, a reference date for us. So I'm just going to create a simple parameter. I'm going to call this fake today. Obviously, if you're going to be building this in a production environment, you would just use the today function for this, and everything would work just fine. We're going to change this to a date, and we're going to change this date to December 1st, 2021. Just like that. All right. Okay. So the first thing that we need to do, now that we have that, the first thing I'm going to do is I am going to, we're going to drag out for order date. It's going to be the date part of month on rows. It's the very first thing we do. So date part of the discrete date part of month, just like that. I will make this bigger. I'll do that. All right, so the first thing we need to do is we need to get the current year sales. So that should be pretty simple. This will be CY sales. And we're just going to be doing if the year of order date is equal to the year of the date of my parameter, then return the sales. Don't return anything else. We're going to end that. And I'm going to go ahead and wrap these. I'm going to go ahead and do the aggregation. I'm going to set the aggregation to sum just to make things easier down the line. We're going to duplicate that. And this is going to be my PY, my prior year sales. Okay. And what it's going to do is if year of order date is equal to year of fake today minus 1. All right, so we're going to find the year of our fake today. We're going to subtract that year. We're going to subtract 1 from that. And that's how we'll get that. So now that we got that, now let's go ahead and do some custom formatting. Right click both of those, default properties, number format, currency, custom, no decimals. We'll show that. All right. Now what I'll do is I will start. So here's a fun way to, here's a quick and easy way to start a worksheet with measure names and measure values. So what I like to do is I'll drag one of my measures onto text. And then all I'll do is double click the next measure that I want. And Tableau automatically will create a, start creating a measure names and measure values table for us. Okay, let's see. Next, we need to, let's take a look. See, so here, CY, PY. Now we need to get this, little emoji. So these are actually emojis, which is pretty interesting. So if you didn't know, you can actually put emojis into your dashboards. They are just ASCII characters. So what they need to do is we'll just do a, what did we call that? Oh yeah, CY versus PY. All right. So CY versus PY. And then this is just going to be a Boolean calculation. So CY greater than or equal to, so we don't have this any weird if they're equal. CY is equal to PY sales. All right. Then actually what I need to do instead of doing Boolean, because remember, so if I just did this, Tableau is going to try and make this I want to put it in measure names, right? So that's what we want to be able to do. We've got to figure out a way to get this into here. So easily done. We'll just turn this into an if statement and make it a number. So then 1 else -1 and that. Okay, this is where things get fun. So for my custom formatting for this new calculation, I'm going to go default properties, number format. I'm going to go straight down to custom. And this is very similar to Microsoft Excel number formatting. So if you're familiar with that, it follows the same rules. I'm going to show my emojis here. There it is. And I'm going to type in here. I'm going to get my cursor right. That's for the positive numbers. And then you separate it with a semicolon. And those are my negative numbers. And now that it's a number, Tableau is able to do something about that. And, oh, profit ratio. That's not what I wanted. This guy right here. Now, it's not showing up, right? It's not showing up, and it's not showing up because it's in desktop. But you can see that it's doing it in the tooltip. Why is that doing it? I don't know. But once we publish it to the server, then it will render in the proper way, right? It'll render like this. Now, sometimes, so something about embedding emojis into your calculations or into your worksheets or stuff like that, you need to be careful because there's two ways that data gets rendered in Tableau. There's, does it get rendered in the web or does it get rendered on the server? And that's going to depend on, and then if it gets rendered on the server, then there are other implications that could be impacting that. So just be aware of that. If it's web, and usually what happens is if the visual is too complex, it will not render your emojis. So just kind of keep in mind of that. If you have emojis in there and it's not rendering, it's probably doing it on the server side rather than on the web. So just kind of keep in mind of that. So, but back in desktop, it's working the way that we want it to. I can see the emojis are showing up the way that they're supposed to. I can see that 43,000 is bigger than 18 and I get a green check mark. So that's great. And again, once I've published it, it will be good to go. All right. So the next thing we need to do is let's do this delta right here, which is going to be, again, did you know you can name your calculated fields with emojis too. So that's pretty fun if you wanted to. So I'm going to call this delta, and it's just going to be my CY minus PY. Very, very simple. Add that in. And there we have that. Now what we need to do is we need to do some more number formatting. Go to number format. We'll go to currency 0. Now what we want to do, if you look at here, we have pluses and minuses, right? So we're going to use that same idea for that we used for negative and positive. So this is our positive values. I'm just going to add a plus sign right before the dollar sign, go over here, remove the parentheses because I don't want those. And then inside right before the dollar sign for negative, I'm just going to put a negative sign there. And now you can see it changed appropriately. So that is the difference. Now we need to calculate the total difference, or the percent difference, I should say. So we'll do percent diff, and that's just going to be my delta divided by my PY sales. Custom default properties, number format, make that a percentage at 1. And let's see, does it have pluses and minuses? It sure does. So we'll go down here, add a plus. I'm just going to copy this, add my semicolon, do a minus there. Add that in. Percent diff right there. We'll add that, we'll drag that down just like that. Starting to look pretty good. Now, here's where things get fun. So we need to figure out a way to calculate what days were best, what was the best day of sales in January in current year, and what was the worst day of January current year of sales. So this is where level of detail expressions come into play. So what we need to do, first thing we need to do, I'm going to do is I'm going to find out my best sales amount per month. And that's going to be fixed month, order date, year of order date, max. I'm going to write this all out and then we'll talk about it. Fixed order date. CY sales. All right, so we've need to have a bracket there. And then we need to have a bracket here. There we go. All right, so let me blow this up so we can talk about this. So here's how to interpret level of detail expressions. So let's work from the inside out and we'll make a little sentence. When you see the fixed in here, basically reply or say in your head for each, right? So for each order date in my data set, let's calculate the current year sales. All right, so that's the first thing it is. For each order date, find the current year sales. Then, once we have that, now for each month and year combination, for each combination of discrete month and discrete year, what is the maximum value of this, right? So first we do for each, for each date, for each individual date, find the sum of sales, essentially. Then for each unique month and year combination, let's take the max, let's find the max of that sum of sales for each order date. That's what this does. So now what we're going to do is we're going to duplicate this and we're going to find the minimum. We're going to do the exact same thing, but we're going to do the minimum. And I'm going to call this worst. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to min. Okay. So this is giving me the value. This is giving, again, this is giving the value of sales, right? And so what we're going to do is we're going to take this value of sales and we're going to check it against every other value of sales, and where we find a match, we'll return the order date for that. So what we need to do now is I'm going to call this best day. And remember, let's do, all right, so let's start outside. We'll start inside. We'll start in the inside of the calculation and then we'll work to the outside. So first thing we need to do is fixed order date, find my CY sales. We'll close that. Okay. So for every single order date in my data set, find the current year sales. Then what we're going to do is if the value of this equals my best day amount per month that we just calculated, then do this here. There we go. Bring this up here. There we go. Then bring me my order, then return the order date. What is the actual date? End. Now, that's a good calculation. That works. However, if I click apply, it goes up here to dimensions. Dimensions can't go and measure names and measure values because they're dimensions. So what can we do? Well, luckily, Anne, when she created these, she gave us a hint. the dates are numbers. So we can just cast this as an integer. Oop. Don't like when Tableau does that. You try and start writing and then you push tab and it overwrites your very first thing you were trying to write. All right, so now we've changed that. Now we have the ability to convert this down to a measure. Just like that, right? If we bring it in here, we get some weird dates, right? So the first thing we need to do is let's go ahead because it's summing it, right? So again, let's go in here and let's just find the max. So let's pre-aggregate it. Let's specifically say how we want to aggregate this. Now we click apply, and now that sends it down here because it's already aggregated. Now we'll go in here, and now we have numbers that look nice, right? So if you're familiar with Excel and the integer dates, this looks pretty good. Now what we can do, so it is a number and it sits in here, but I want it to be a date. Well, we can go make it a date by changing the number format to custom. And we do mm/dd/YYYY. Okay, now you can see that our best day was on January 14th. Let's see if that checks out over on our example. It doesn't check out. It's 2 days behind. Well, that took some digging, and turns out the way that Tableau does its integer dates and where it starts and the baseline date against the Microsoft Excel data source, there's basically a 2-day offset. And if you want to read more about that, Jonathan Drummey 5 years ago did a great explanation of looking at epoch dates and why integer dates don't match the actual dates. So I'm going to drop this in here so that you can bookmark it for future reference. But what we need to do is we need to account for that offset, right? +2. And now they match, right? And now we'll just duplicate this. Edit, duplicate, and we'll do min. And instead of best sales day, it's going to be worst sales day. And this is called worst day. Okay. There it is, 116.16. Let's see. 116.16. Bingo. All right. So the next thing we need to do is we need to figure out the top and bottom, basically the rank. Is it in the top 6? Is it in the top 6 performing months or the bottom? So what I like to do here is I'm just going to do an index. All right. And I'm going to call this rank. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a nested. I'm going to do another one. So I'm going to nest these 2 table calculations, the index and not nest, excuse me. Just going to basically create a calculation off of this. I'm going to call this this top or bottom. If my rank calculation is greater or less than or equal, less than or equal to 6, then return +1, else -1. I'm going to do the exact same thing I did over here for this. I'm going to do custom formatting. Default properties, number, format, custom, top, semicolon, bottom. Now, when I do this and I throw that in there, it says everything is on top because it's ranking everything down. Now, I'm going to go here. I'm going to bring this over here. I'm going to do specific dimensions. And even though I only have one dimension and there's only one way to go, the reason I need to do specific dimensions is because I need to change the sort order. And I need to change the sort order. So this is probably something that probably very, very seldomly gets used, but is really, really powerful. So if you have, especially when you start dealing with ranks or indexes and you want to index things on different levels, this is where you can set the scope and direction of your rank stuff independently from each other. So you can just come in here and I'll go custom, and I'm going to do descending, and it's going to be my CY sales. And that didn't work. Why not? Let's see. Well, let's see what this rank calculation does. Yes, that's working. Edit. Custom sort. Custom. CY sales. Custom aggregation. Yep. I bet it has to do. I figured it out. So it has to do with the way that so I'll get rid of this. So, nope, not this. It's the way that I'm doing my formatting. So in order to get this right, I have to add double quotes around each one. Now, when I click apply, there they changed, right? So if you want to add your custom number formatting, if you want to add anything special, in order for Tableau to recognize it, you have to explicitly say this is what you want by using quotes around that. All right. So now that we're here, I'll go ahead and do workbook formatting. We'll do bring everything up, semi-bold. Yep. Maybe worksheets, we'll do 10. That looks good. All right, so the next thing we need to do is we need to get the color. How do we get the color on there? Well, what we can do, we can drag our measure values onto color. And then we'll click on this and we'll say use separate legends. Back in my day, when I first started using Tableau, this was not a thing. You couldn't do this. You only had one color legend per measure names to rule them all. It was not fun, but now they finally said, yeah, okay, we'll give you separate legends. So now what you can do is you can just come in here and edit these. Come in here to a custom diverging. And I want these, I want my CY and PY sales to be black. So I'm just going to use this black color here. I'm going to set both to that. I'm going to do a stepped color and a stepped range of 2. So that's the same on both sides. Click apply. Now we've got that all the way down. And then you would just do that the whole way down for each one that you wanted. You know, if we wanted to, so we'll do the, just for the sake of time, we'll do top and bottom, edit colors, and come in here, we'll do gray, bottom is red. This is green. Stepped color 2. And you can see now that it's colored the right way. And then you would just duplicate that process for all of your different measures. So it takes some time, but at least you now have the ability to do that. So, which is good. So hopefully that was enjoyable. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you have any, if you enjoyed this, got some learning out of it, this is something that I've started doing more regularly over on my YouTube channel. So generally every Thursday or Friday around lunchtime, you can come over to my YouTube page and I'll do a live stream of whichever challenge is the most current challenge for Workout Wednesday. So, and this is the kind of stuff that we do, right? So you watch me build something from scratch based on one of these challenges, learn about some of the reasons why Tableau does some of the things it does, watch me fail. That's a fun thing because failing is when you learn. So you can see how I kind of approach my, how I approach building dashboards in Tableau from a technical perspective, and kind of learn some of the ins and outs of why Tableau does some of the things that it does. So, and then obviously I'll drop in some good puns and some good jokes and that kind of stuff. So hopefully come hang out with me and it'll be a good time. So over on my YouTube, just search for Hipster Viz Ninja. You can find it. You can find my page, follow me, and it'll be fun. So any questions? All right. Oh, thanks, David. Glad you got something out of it. Let's see if there's any. I do see 3 questions. Great. All right. Yes. So John asked about the shapes. Yes, absolutely. If you wanted to, you could absolutely. Let me get rid of this. Whoop. Where are we going? There we go. All right. So yeah, you could absolutely use the shapes mark type. However, the reason you can't do that, now that I think about it, because this is all one sheet and we're using measure names and measure values, you only get one mark type to choose from. So they're just all automatic text right now. If I were to change this to shape, it's going to change all of them, right? And that's not what I wanted. So that's why we use the emojis as opposed to you could do that as opposed. Now, additionally, if you didn't want to use measure names and measure values, but you still wanted to make it all one sheet, you could use placeholder. You could use placeholder columns, and that would give you a separate mark card for every single placeholder, and then you could customize each one to its liking. Can you set the text color for positive and negative in? You cannot. Unfortunately, we do not have the ability to set the colors or the number format, or set the colors within the number formatting. I know that there is also an idea out on the Tableau ideas board for being able to do what you just asked to do. As well as I know that there's an idea that has several thousand votes, is the ability to set the number formatting within the calculated field, because sometimes that can get really funky sometimes as well. So, all right, and then another question: what if there were 2 order dates that were tied with the same maximum? How could you get both days? That's a great question. You would have to, probably what would happen is you would have, instead of doing, this is good. This is the one, this is the ones, these are the questions that make me think. And Jay, or if you have any ideas, feel free to jump in. How could you get, if you had multiple days that were the same one? I guess what you could do is you could do a pre-table, you could do a pre-aggregation before you did the first day, best day, you could count the days where it matched, right? And if it was ever over one, then you would have some value. And then within the tooltip, you could do a Vision tooltip that would list out all the days that matched. That's probably the way that I would go about it first. Off the cuff, live, thinking about this. That's probably the way that I would go about that. With the double quotes in the formatting string, fix the CY. Oh, good. Brian, great question. Would the double quotes in the formatting string fix the emojis? Perhaps. Let's take a look. I don't think so, because I think it has to do with the how it's being rendered. But let's check it out, because because you can see that it's coming up in the tooltip, right? So it makes me think that, but we'll try it. Nope, no change. So it really has to do with how it's being rendered on the server. So that's that. So, all right, well, that taps up this. And I think that that wraps us up for this week, or for this month, I should say. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing. There we go. Cool. And thanks so much. Hope everyone has a wonderful week, a wonderful month. Go Chiefs. Hopefully the next time we're getting together, we're celebrating a Super Bowl victory. If not, we're celebrating a Super Bowl appearance. So have a wonderful month. Let us know again in the chat who you want to see, who you want to present, who you would love to see present at the KC Tug, and we will take it from there and see what we can do to get some great speakers. Again, if you have any questions, comments, don't hesitate to reach out. We're happy to help. So thank you so much. Have a wonderful week. Have a wonderful month. We'll talk to you next time.